English translation. 401st contact. Saturday, 15th October 2005, 22:23 hours.
Be warmly welcome, my friend. Would we like to get started on the correction work right away? Hans-Georg beamed over 30 pages again.
Be greeted, Edward. Yes, I think we should get the correction work done first. We can talk later.
That is fine with me. So then the computer is switched on, now it just has to boot up. So, now the file, and that is it already, and there is also the point where we can continue.
Then let us begin.
Done. Next time we can edit the new pages.
What Hans-Georg has compiled and executed in this new book is remarkable. It is very appealing to me because it is informative, correct, and detailed. And I find it especially valuable that there are repetitions in it because this allows the later reader to understand what is said and explained, and it makes it stand out in the memory. He has learned a lot from you in this respect, and has become aware of the truth of your word when you say, only repetitions settle deep in the memory.
Which, unfortunately, is usually disputed by sly thinkers, know-it-alls and adversaries of all sorts, as well as humans who, for whatever reason, find it annoying and cannot understand that only through repetition does everything come to mind in such a wise that it remains there for the rest of your life. Of course, there are also exceptions to the rule, and consequently humans who fall outside it are also disturbed by it, that they have to repeat something several times in order to keep it in memory. It can only disappear from the memory if the memory is damaged by an accident, by illness, drugs, vice, or alcohol, as well as by mental or consciousness disorders. If, for example, something is read, heard, or seen only once, then it never settles in the memory so permanently that it is durable for all times and can be recalled again and again, because the memory image in the memory fades. This also causes the memory and the actual image of what is seen or read to fade away, which leads to the emergence of foreign images, which means that a false memory emerges from which false memory images appear. For example, a larger number of humans can see one and the same situation completely differently, depending on how intensively and often they look at the situation. And in fact, a situation, a picture, or anything else can be viewed several times within a very short time, and thus be imprinted in the memory. If this happens, then it does not occur that suddenly false memory images appear, as is often the case when several humans observe one and the same event, as for example when a car is observed, which then has to be described. The rule is then that each observing person thought they saw a different color of the vehicle. In the case of an observed accident, etc., exactly the same is the case, because even there, each person observing the event sees everything differently, according to how intensively and often within seconds everything is observed. Exactly or superficially and inaccurately, the latter usually being the case.
Your words apply exactly to what is given. But listen to what I have to call further predictions. On the 17th of October, the Aegean Sea will be shaken by two seaquakes of magnitude 5.7 and 5.9, after which another quake of magnitude 6 will follow these quakes in the night from the 20th to the 21st of October, which in turn will cause several aftershocks. Before that, Japan will have an earthquake of magnitude 5.3, followed by a seaquake of magnitude 6.5 off the coast of Ibaraki in Japan on the 19th of October. In earthquake areas of Pakistan, Afghanistan, and India, as well as in Indian and Pakistani Kashmir, the number of dead will rise to around 85,000, because many were buried and seriously injured under the rubble of the buildings to such an extent that any help was and will be futile for them. And the recent new quake has also claimed even more lives. However, I will report on this when we have more precise data. The onset of winter will also cost more lives, as more than 2 million humans are homeless and exposed to the wild weather, so many of them will fall ill and lose their lives. These are the results of our current investigations in this regard.
Please, if I may interrupt you. You said some time ago that the bird epidemic was already in Europe, which has now been proven true. Were you referring only to Turkey and Romania?
No, because also in southern Europe, in western Russia, and in northern Europe, the disease has already been introduced by migratory birds in a few individual cases. However, it has not yet spread very far among birds, and it has not yet spread to domestic poultry. Russia will, however, in the next few days be just as obvious as countries in southern Europe in terms of the introduction of the bird disease. However, the disease has not yet been transmitted to humans in such a wise that a human disease virus would have emerged. So there is no danger of this happening as of yet. This danger can be largely eliminated if decisive countermeasures are taken.
Right, you said that. But in order to avoid panic-mongering, we should talk openly about it, pour clear wine for humans, and also point out that there is no direct danger for them yet, right? Because of the epidemic, which has already been introduced into Europe in a few cases by migratory birds, it will probably be early enough when it is officially announced by the authorities.
That is probably correct.
Concerning the bird epidemic, there is a huge trade in various influenza drugs, also in criminal form, because the human's fear is fueled immeasurably by the irrationality of the media. Especially the drug Tamiflu is a big seller and makes the manufacturers and shop owners as well as certain criminals rich who sell the stuff.
I'm aware of this, although I must say that this is pure profiteering with the human being's fear. Because all the drugs of the kind mentioned so far on the market are completely useless against the bird epidemic with the designation H5N1. It must also be said that the irresponsibility of the media is creating fear among the population, which is leading to panic buying of useless medicines against the bird epidemic. The fear also leads to false alarms about the epidemic in some places, as is happening in several countries.
This is acknowledged by certain officials who deal with the disease professionally. But there is no benefit in that, because there is no major drug available around the world. Research is still in its infancy to develop an effective drug that can be used when the disease actually mutates in humans and becomes dangerous for them.
At least this is not disputed. In contrast to the fact that the epidemic is also transmissible from person to person, but so far only in a certain form through direct physical contact if a corresponding infection already exists. This fact is disputed, however, because medical science does not yet know the true state of these things. But such infections have already occurred several times in Asia.
Bird and fowl droppings, bird and fowl dust, and the flesh and blood of birds and domestic fowl are still the main infectious factors at the moment, which can make humans ill, as you said recently. And it must be said that I believe that governments, authorities, and medical scientists are just as responsible in relation to this bird epidemic to protect the population from it, as they were in relation to BSE, although all those responsible have claimed that the species barrier is a protection and that it cannot be broken. The BSE epidemic could not spread to humans, but the opposite was soon proven.
That is all correct, what you say. If the H5N1 epidemic degenerates and spreads to humans in such the wise that a new form of human virus and human epidemic develops from it, then a pandemic in relation to humans cannot be avoided. If they fall ill with the epidemic, then they too form dangerous infection factors, in such a form that blood and saliva contacts become just as decisive for an infection or transmission of the epidemic as the so-called droplet infection. If strict precautions against the spread of the bird epidemic are already being taken worldwide, and governmental and official measures are urgently required, then the spread to humans in the form mentioned above can be avoided. The most urgent necessity is that all domestic and breeding poultry be locked away to avoid any contact with migratory birds and their excrements, saliva, and dust. In this kind and wise, the poultry does not have to be killed or destroyed as is done in Eastern countries. But there is no time to lose, because the whole thing around the H5N1 bird epidemic is not harmless. However, it is clear to say with everything, the human must also avoid any contact with any kind of wild fowl with their excrement, dust, and meat. The bird flu or bird epidemic affects birds and poultry and therefore not humans, at least not at the present time. But that the bird epidemic will sooner or later mutate and spread to humans and then trigger a pandemic must be assumed as probable if the necessary and effective countermeasures are not taken now.
You said that. You know more than you say, I can hear that from your words. But if you do not want to or are not allowed to say more, I will not ask you about it. But may I ask, I know Greece quite well, as I have traveled the country and lived and worked there. Where do the seaquakes occur in Greece?
That is no secret. It occurs in the Aegean Sea, near an island called Chios. 2 further seaquakes will also occur in the Ionian Sea, on the 19th of October near the island of Zakynthos, with a magnitude of 6 on the Richter scale, and another one in the northwest off Greece, also in the Ionian Sea, this second seaquake having a magnitude of 4.9.
I know it. The island is off the Turkish mainland in the Aegean Sea, more precisely the city of Sesme. I know this because I learned it when I was traveling in Turkey and I was in Izmir. Chios, that is to say Chios, is not far from Kos, where therapies with dolphins and beluga whales take place, as Eva told me. I also told her then, when the great seaquake occurred off Sumatra, that in the Aegean Sea there will be seaquakes and earthquakes in the coming time, with a very violent one being the ultimate climax. As you said at the time, there will be buckets down there, huge earthquakes and seaquakes, the forerunners of which are now supposed to be on the 17th of October.
Your explanations correspond to what was given. And the impending earthquakes in the Aegean and Ionian Seas are in fact only the beginning and the precursors of a very severe seaquake, which, however, will still have to wait for some time. But let me now mention some more predictions. In the Gulf of Mexico, another major hurricane will be raging, one called Wilma, which will be even more powerful than the 2 previous ones. It will reach a storm speed of around 350 kilometers per hour, which will be the strongest hurricane measured so far and will hit Jamaica, Yucatan, Honduras, Cuba, and also the south of Florida, etc., unfortunately also claiming lives and causing a lot of catastrophic destruction.
If I can interrupt you again, in the USA, they calculate the severity of storms from 1 to 5. In which category does this hurricane fall?
This hurricane will be called Category 5, but it exceeds this strength because the scale must be expanded or increased from now on, and this hurricane must be given the value 6. This hurricane will be followed by a number of others in the next few weeks, and consequently, in relation to these, for the first time per year, there will be more hurricanes than ever before in living memory.
You said yes, as Sfath, Sim-Ya say, and Quetzal have said before, that the storms and severe weather will become more and more violent, more powerful, and out of control, exceeding every known norm. You also said recently that the whole of the coming catastrophes can no longer be stopped, because the humans have destroyed far too much in nature and the entire environment.
That is correct. It will also prove itself again when, after the 20th of October, heavy rainfall sets in southern Italy, in Puglia, which will cause flooding over a wide area and will also claim some lives. On the 24th of October, there will be 2 earthquakes of magnitude 4.9 and 5.2 in Afghanistan, as well as another earthquake of magnitude 6 in the already affected area of Pakistan. At the same time, a large volcanic eruption occurs in a crater about 10 kilometers in size on the Galapagos Islands. In Palestine, radical elements will carry out new suicide bombings and bombings against Israel, leading to new escalations by Sharon's order, which orders a new war of hatred with airstrikes against the Palestinians, who are firing homemade and commercial rockets at Israel, causing new bloodshed. It has also come to the point where propaganda for assassinations and suicide attacks is being made in Switzerland, because for some time now, and you probably do not know this yet, calls for hatred of the Holy War have been spread on the internet by radical Islamists living illegally in Switzerland. In the coming weeks, India will be affected by large amounts of rain and the resulting flooding in several areas, resulting in a serious railway accident with a large number of deaths due to the undermining of a railway line. While in Iran, the new president and fanatical Zionist enemy Mahmoud Ahmadinejad will make a name for himself worldwide when he spreads anti-Israeli hate tirades on television and incites the Iranian people and loudly demands that Israel should disappear from the map of the world. This will result in a huge million-dollar hate demonstration against Israel. Ahmadinejad is a very dangerous fanatic, who is also bent on intrigues and willing to start this war against all those states that are of a different faith, or are Israel-friendly, or are otherwise related to Israel, or are considering doing so. The Frankfurt Book Fair will also suffer under his advocacy, where anti-Jewish writings are promoted at the Iranian bookstall in order to stir up anti-Semitism.
This guy, if I am not mistaken, is the one who played a leading role as one of the fanatical ringleaders in the U.S. Embassy occupation and hostage-taking in Tehran on the 4th of November 1979, as Sim Yaseh told me at the time. According to a photograph in a newspaper showing several of the violent Iranian students who carried out the embassy raid.
That is correct.
Before you make any more predictions, I have 2 more questions. I'm frequently asked, especially from the US and Mexico, about the sporadic appearance of small white objects at high altitude in the sky. I have also been sent a video showing such objects, white, round things that appear like small moving clouds that often change their position and sometimes seem to merge into each other, but then separate again. There are hundreds of such things at a time. To me, it looks as if they are small cloud-like formations, which, as with larger similar phenomena in relation to earthquake lights, are caused by natural phenomena such as gas concentrations, and by Earth's electromagnetic swinging waves and energies, which are then mistaken for UFOs in the sense that they are extraterrestrial beam ships or flying machines. Also, the earthquake lights are interpreted again and again as UFOs of extraterrestrial origin, because they often have forms which look like some kind of futuristic flying objects. These often shining electromagnetic objects also have the property, as you have explained to me, that hallucinations are caused in some humans, which are often based on the fact that some humans consider everything to be real. Very often such hallucinations lead to illusory experiences in such a wise that the hallucinators see themselves as abducted by aliens, especially with regard to small gray men with big almond-shaped eyes, etc. False memory images are created by the brain, which feigns something experienced without actually happening. A phenomenon that also occurs in such humans in a state of hypnosis. As you once explained, in the hypnotic state, stories and experiences are created in the brain that seem completely real, but are not real and therefore never happened. If I remember correctly, these hallucinations are triggered in the cranial and temporal lobes. So it follows that the alleged abductions of terrestrials by extraterrestrials are based on pure hallucinations, as well as all the associated stories of alleged medical examinations, impregnations, robbery of the fetus, of strange time gaps, the local displacement of the allegedly affected, the switching off of lights and car engines, etc. Of the hundreds and thousands of allegedly abducted humans all over the world, with the USA leading the way, the truth is that only 2 authentic cases in the last 240 years can be mentioned. As you recently explained to me in a purely private conversation, even the fairy tales of alleged implants, etc., are based on hallucinations or on events in which the person concerned has had, in some unnoticeable kind and wise, their body or limbs penetrated by a foreign body, metal or plastic, etc. It is not uncommon for there to be several such foreign bodies. Even mass observations of alleged extraterrestrial ships can be based on hallucinations caused by the Earth's electromagnetic swinging waves and their energies, especially if strange nebulous or cloud-like formations are connected with them, which are caused by ionizations in the atmosphere.
Although we talked about it before, but apparently I misunderstood you regarding the objects in Mexico and explained that I had no answer to that. But now I know what your question is about, which I can only answer in the sense that you just explained it. And what you are going to say is actually based on our findings as we conveyed them to you. Unfortunately, this will not change the fact that all those who believe in the absurdities of alleged abductions by extraterrestrials and in everything allegedly connected with them will not be taught. In this regard, any instruction in relation to reality is usually just as meaningless as it is in relation to crop circles, belief in ghosts. All esotericism, religious sectarianism, the false teachings of religions and everything that has to do with occultism and hallucinations, imaginations and delusions of any kind from the human brain.
I probably did not make myself clear in my question at the time, so if you misunderstood me, it is probably my fault. Ah yes, here is this note, on which is written 5th Contact, Sunday, 16th February 1975, 23:41 hours. Contact Volume 1, pages 45-46, sentences 51-59. Wait, here I copied it out in the computer and it says this.
Then 3,553 years ago, the destroyer penetrated into the earthly solar system and disordered the planetary orbits by its gigantic forces. Passing close to the Earth, it wrapped it in its huge tail and shook it very hard. Huge storms and volcanic eruptions were the result. Humans and animals died in great masses, mountains were moved, and the depths of the sea changed. In the Mediterranean Sea, the magma walls of the volcano Santorini were torn apart deep down and great waters penetrated. This caused a huge catastrophe because the volcano exploded and destroyed the island. The explosion created a gigantic storm surge, which rose to a height of 200 meters and swept over the sea like a primeval monster. Everything in it was killed and crushed, and the water turned blood red. In Egypt, this storm surge flooded vast areas and caused all kinds of epidemics, while the tidal wave ran back and raced northeast across the sea, destroying vast areas and all port cities on the eastern shore of the sea, in present-day Syria.
It has now become apparent that in recent years, research has been carried out into the plagues in Egypt during the time of Moses. And it has actually come to the attention of researchers that these proven plagues were caused by the eruption and destruction of the volcano Santorini. However, they date the events of that time to a completely wrong time, namely about 200 years before the time that Sim-Yaseh and Quetzal cited. Scientists have found out that the enormous ash cloud of the exploded volcano reached Egypt, causing a so-called physteria or physteria epidemic to break out. Although this is not mentioned in the report of the conversation regarding the ash cloud, and therefore not in the quoted. Sim-Yaseh once mentioned it in a private conversation, as did Quetzal. All aquatic animals and many land animals died, and the water of the Nile turned red because of the blood of the fish, animals, and humans, who were affected by rashes all over their bodies. Then there was a huge tsunami, caused by the volcanic explosion, which was about 200 meters high, 180 meters to be precise, and which rolled deep into the land, killing a great deal of life once again, and also contributing to the epidemics. Quetzal said some things at the 150th Official Contact Conversation Volume 4, pages 288 and 294, on Saturday, 10th October 1981, 03:15 ARS.
Page 288.
Destroyer gets dangerously close to the Earth, causing severe disasters. Earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, elemental storms, and floods of enormous proportions are the result. Volcanic ash causes the sun to darken slightly, lasting several weeks. The volcano Santorini in the Hellenic Sea explodes and triggers a 180-meter-high tidal wave that rolls over the Mediterranean Sea and far into the Nile of Egypt, flooding everything. Not only many humans die as a result, but also countless animals whose carcasses decay after the flood rolls back and cause much evil. This event triggers the 7 biblical plagues Moses' time for Moses, whereby the water of the Nile is also colored red by the blood of the innumerable forms of life that have been killed and their bodies torn and maltreated. The flood that rolls back again pushes back over the Mediterranean Sea and forward to the northeast, where it inundates Syria and causes enormous terror and devastation.
Page 294.
Well, even so, but still, even though I do not think it is right not to tell us. Nevertheless, however, one last question, and that is because of the destroyer, Santorini and Moses. My time travels with Ascot have indeed taught me the correctness of the data and statements you have made, but I have recently read variously in writings that the time of Moses and the Santorini eruption are calculated into completely different periods. From 1500 BC, these calculations and assertions extend into the 5th millennium BC.
This is due to the time falsifications of the chroniclers, whereby the Jewish chroniclers and other chroniclers influenced by them committed the worst evils in this respect, whereby time falsifications in the transmission of data have appeared for up to several thousand years. Santorini erupted and exploded due to the powerful influence of the destroyer exactly 3,153 years ago, counting back from 2000, with Moses living at that time and preparing the exodus in Egypt for the then Hebrew Jewish people. These dates are correct, as you yourself were able to determine on the basis of your travels with Ascot into the past. And Moses really lived and carried out the exodus, even if it is later claimed that this is not true.
So you are just confirming my own observation.
Something else is not possible for me, because we cannot, like the Earth humans, simply falsify data. Because chronicles are not written down daily, but often only after many centuries, or even after 2,000 years, according to oral tradition, as was the case with the Jewish and various other folk chronicles, whereby time, data, and events were falsified in such a wise that even 2 or 3 events that took place simultaneously were torn apart and occurred separately in periods of centuries or millennia, while on the other hand, 2 events that were thousands of years apart were assigned to the same time. A very unfortunate fact, which will unfortunately still cause a great deal of confusion, errors, and strife among the Earth humans.
Which I guess cannot be prevented.
Which is again of correctness. The quoted corresponds to the records we have in relation to these events. The earthly scientists are very wrong if they date the whole thing to another time. Going back to the year 2000 AD, it is 3,453 years since the events took place. So, counting from today, the catastrophe happened 3,458 years ago. There is nothing to be done about it even if the earthly scientists give different dates. But if they do, then this may be due to the fact that for the first centuries backwards, false results are obtained due to changes in the materials to be tested, which results in false time results.
I am aware of that. But thanks for your explanation. Then I would like to point out that in the Prophecy and Prediction, which I formulated and wrote in 1958 according to the statements of Sfath and Asket, along with some calculations of my own, Verse 142 talks about the fact that one day only one valuable language will be spoken on the earth. This has obviously led to a misunderstanding for various humans, because the whole thing was understood in such a wise that only one single language would be in use on the earth. But as I understood the whole thing during Sfath's explanations, and according to my own calculations, the 142nd verse is to be understood in such a wise that only one single and valuable language will be spoken for worldwide understanding, while, however, many other languages and dialects will be in use, as before, adapted to the individual races, etc. One single and valuable language will be a world language that encompasses the whole world and is spoken by all humans in addition to their own mother tongue. It will therefore be a realization of a unified language which unites humans, as the idea of Esperanto actually was, but which has never been realized because this artificial language has never been introduced to the masses of the population and practically only in business, etc., and so on. This is how I understood the prediction as my calculations showed.
The whole thing can also be understood in the wise as you have explained it.
Well, that should be clear by now. But if you have some more predictions to make, I am all ears.
Yes, there is not much more to mention. Among other things, that a small tornado is forming in Germany in the area of Bad Kissingen at the time of the 22nd or 23rd of October, but it will cause considerable damage also in nature. This will be followed by another in northern Germany on 25th and 26th of October. That is all we can say at the moment. I can only tell you new facts on my next visit, which will not be until the 29th of October because next Saturday I will be as unreachable as Florina and Enjana, so the correction work will be cancelled.
Then I can continue working on your questions. So far I have managed a little more than 400, so there are still 1,390 to work on.
This is very gratifying for us, and our spiritual leadership is very grateful to you. We have already taken over everything, and our linguists are already converting everything into the necessary languages. But you really do not have to hurry so much with this work because, as I told you before, we reckoned that you would need about a year to work it all out. But now goodbye, Edward, dear friend, until the 29th of October. By the way, I would like to send you greetings from my daughters Plaja and Simya-Se, as well as from Quetzal, Asket, Florena, Taljda, and Enjana, and from all the others who know you and are very fond of you.
Give them all also my greetings and my thanks.